We'll just give it a few minutes for folks to join. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Co-op Leaders Tell Their Stories. My name is Lisa Buckner, and I'm the Education Coordinator at National Farmers Union. I'm joined behind the scenes by Emma McCormick, our Senior Director of Engagement. We are happy to celebrate October as Co-op Month with you all today with this webinar. Before we kick off today's discussion, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping things. This webinar is being hosted in webinar mode on Zoom, which means you are automatically muted and your cameras are off. If you have a question or comment, feel free to add it in the chat or Q&A, and we will address it at the end of the session. Also, this video is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to our YouTube channel in the coming days. This webinar is the second of 2 webinars we've hosted this month to mark Co-op Month, but National Farmers Union hosts a number of co-op related webinars throughout the year. If you'd like to be notified of our upcoming co-op programming, you can subscribe to our co-op newsletter. A link to that was just put into the chat. At the end of this webinar, we will put a link to a survey in the chat, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback as it helps us to deliver quality co-op webinars to future audiences. But as for today, we are joined by 3 inspiring co-op leaders. These leaders either founded the co-ops they now work with or otherwise hold significant leadership positions with their co-ops. And moderating today's discussion is Annie Hoy. Annie is a cooperative development specialist with the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, and I will turn it over to Annie now to introduce herself and introduce our speakers and kick off today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Of course, I did the thing that everybody does, right? I'm muted before I speak. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're all joining us, and I'm really very happy to be a part of today's webinar. I'm very excited about our 3 speakers today, Angela and Dela and Tim. Each has a very unique co-op story. And a seasoned cooperator once told me that wherever there's a problem, there's a co-op solution. And certainly these 3 cooperators and their cooperatives have solved a problem or are solving a problem. So we didn't really talk about who was going to go first, but I'm just going to pick around and say, Tim, would you tell us about your co-op, how you got started, and how you serve your community?
Well, thank you. I certainly can do that, Annie. I'm in Southwest Minnesota, farmer by trade, and I think pretty much everything I do is surrounded doing business with co-ops. I think everyone's heard of the Capper-Volstead Act, which allowed co-ops to come into existence. Andrew Volstead, who was one of the people who was the authors of that act, is from Granite Falls, my hometown. So we're in the heart of co-op community around here. Growing up, my dad, my grandpa, my uncles, everybody at one time or another served on a co-op board, whether it was a trucking association, grain elevator, supply co-op for feed, fertilizer. Co-ops are simply the way we do business around here. I have ran for and successfully got on our electric co-op board a number of years ago. And then I ran for the Minnesota State Rural Electric Co-op Association and got on that board. And a couple of years ago, I ran for the National Rural Electric Co-op Board and got on that. So I serve on our local co-op electric co-op board, the state co-op board, and also the national co-op board. Our area, the electric co-op, 1935, FDR enacted the Rural Electrification Act, which allowed co-ops to come into existence, and the government gave some low interest loans to help co-ops, electric co-ops get started. At that time, investor owned and municipal electric companies were going, but nobody wanted to serve the rural area. They didn't think there'd be enough demand to make it ever pay to run lines and hook up farm places for electricity. So co-ops were formed. It happens that our area, we were formed, one of the first electric co-ops in the country was formed right here in 1914, which was 21 years before the Rural Electrification Act. So we had electric co-op here long before they started moving across the country. And electric co-ops have grown to not only provide the electric co-ops, but we're also, a number of them are going into broadband. A lot of the investor owns feel it's too expensive to be putting broadband in rural areas. So electric co-ops, many, not all of them, but many electric co-ops have stepped up and are also providing broadband in our area. So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from as far as co-ops. One interesting thing, when I was, I don't know, probably in my middle 20s, local co-op, a supply co-op sent me to electric co-op school. And we were out in Wisconsin for a week and learning all the attributes of electric co-ops. And I came back and I was supposed to go around and do some speaking on that. So I did. And here, I think about a year ago, a fellow came to me with a picture from the newspaper article back in the 70s. And I was speaking to a group about co-ops, and I said, wow, I said, I didn't realize I'd been speaking to co-ops for that long. And he said, that's your take? And I said, yeah. I said, well, what was your take? And he said, well, you used to be skinny and have dark hair. So the co-op world is a close world. And anyway, that's probably enough about me. We can move on from there.
Thank you so much, Tim. I relate to the hair color thing. Wow, electric co-ops have always inspired me, especially for the public service that they do, and not just in the US, but sending electric cooperators out to developing nations to help electrify small villages. So sometimes for the first time, the kids can do their homework because they have light. So I love that about electric co-ops. Dela, how about you go next and tell us how you got involved with co-ops and the co-op that you are involved with now?
Okay, thank you. I live in southern Wisconsin, and I am a founder of a new co-op called Community Kitchen Co-op, which is very young. We've been in business a year. We've been working on forming the co-op for a couple years, did a lot of groundwork during COVID to set up all our bylaws and do our business plan and all that kind of stuff before we actually opened a year ago, October. It's been quite a journey and quite a learning experience. This is the first co-op board that I've been on, although we have an electric co-op and a food co-op in Madison and a lot of other co-ops I've been involved with. And really through the Farmers Union, that co-ops were introduced to me as something important. I have a farm, a organic vegetable farm. We did CSA for over 25 years. So marketing produce and organic produce was first and foremost. And my husband and I have talked a lot about food shed and how important food shed is, and keeping our food local and supporting our local farmers. And so our community kitchen was born out of that idea. And we at the kitchen, our members are farmers and workers. Right now we've had a dual membership, but we're finding that extremely difficult because workers in the food industry are hard to get. And farmers are extremely busy, especially in the summer, and don't really step up to help the co-op that much. So we've learned a ton along the way this first year and have decided that really we need to all work together and not be two separate parts of the co-op at this time. Maybe when we're bigger, that will work more efficiently, but right now we need everybody. And so that's what we're doing right now. But yeah, our goal is to buy our food from our member farmers, and then we make meals, and they're purchased like a CSA, which is a hard sell. And especially in a small rural community, we'd like to focus as close to our kitchen as possible in membership. We are reaching out to the Madison area, which is a bigger city, but prefer that we focus on our local community. There's money there because it's a Madison bedroom community. And but marketing is challenging. We're changing the way people think about their food, and we want the importance of local to be first and foremost in their mind. And that's a really, really hard concept for consumers. So we're doing something way outside the box, and we found that to be challenging, but we're very determined to support our local farms and let people know who their farmers are and where their food comes from. So yeah, that's what we're doing, and I'll wait till you have more questions for me.
Okay. How many members do you have?
Right now, we have about a dozen farms and workers. It's gone up and down a little bit. On the worker end, people get burned out. And on the farmer end, they're focusing on their farms in the summer. So we're adding slowly because right now we have enough farms and we don't want to get so many we can't support them. Mm-hmm. So, but we could sure use more workers.
Great. Thank you, Dela. Well, Angela, you're up next, and we'd love to hear about the genesis of your co-op and the services it provides.
Well, thank you for having me here this afternoon, Annie. Good afternoon to everyone. Wonderful to hear the farming stories of both Dela and Tim. Mine is a little different, but also really the same. My name is Angela Dawson. I'm a co-founder and president of the 40-Acre Cooperative. It's an agricultural cooperative headquartered here in north central Minnesota. And we're focused on a couple of, just like what all co-ops do, right? It's a group of people who are coming together to meet needs that aren't being met by the, current economy, government, or system that was set up. And so I'm a fourth generation reclamation farmer, fifth if you count the enslaved ancestor, but basically, I was in my second year of law school a couple of years ago, and I took the opportunity to go and learn about growing hemp and cannabis on the West Coast. And I was making a decision. I was at a crossroads in my career where I was trying to decide whether I wanted to continue along the route of being a lawyer and accumulating all the student loan debt that was already burdening me, or what I say is, or take the farming route. And what ended up happening was, I didn't choose farming. I think farming chose me. And it's been an important part of my own family legacy here in the upper Midwest of Minnesota and Iowa area, where my family had been farming for many generations. I'm the first of those grandchildren, however, to reclaim the farming legacy. And so it's made quite an impact for me personally and also for my family. But basically what happened was when I decided, or when farming chose me a few years ago and I decided not to become an attorney, I also found out about some of the issues that people of color deal with, specifically in rural areas and accessing traditional USDA resources. And so I should also mention that I had been a member of co-ops here in Minnesota for many years, mostly on the food side, but also I was an electric co-op consumer. I was also, do some of the sporting and recreational cooperatives. There's a bike co-op in the Twin Cities. Had always really immersed myself in the education of cooperatives through the Association of Cooperative Educators.
Mhm.
So I tried to read up as much as I can on co-ops, and I also was actually really excited as a mom to be able to have food co-ops here. I had children with food allergies and health conditions that didn't really lend well to the traditional food system. And so I had always relied on agricultural food co-ops in order to source food for my family. But one of the things that I noticed over the years that I had been members of co-ops here in the state is that to me, they lack diversity. And so I could see, co-ops, of course, we have some of the most highest grossing co-ops in the country here with Land O'Lakes and all the large ones, right? But I also found that there were some needs that I knew and that my family knew and farmers like me had that weren't being addressed by the current co-ops that we had access to. So the combination of that issue and the issue that I had with accessing resources to start my farm with the USDA resulted in the creation of the 40-acre cooperative. And as you might be able to tell by the name, the 40 acres comes from sort of a generational issue that has happened in the United States for a long time related to the 40 acres and a mule. That was a part of the Special Field Order 15 during the Civil War, when the Union was winning the war and the slaves that were fighting were promised 40 acres and a mule when the war was over. And then when Lincoln was assassinated, that promise went away. So there was a couple of farmers that did start homesteading, but they were removed and replaced by Confederate soldiers. So I say that the story of the farmer within this country, the black farmer in particular, has been really exploitative ever since then. And so the 40-acre co-op is working to create more equity in agriculture so that we all have a fair opportunity to grow for ourselves and for our communities, and to create financial abundance and create generational wealth and healing for all of our communities, because we all rely on it. And so that's a little bit about me and how the 40-acre co-op got started, and I'd love to share some more with questions.
Great. Well, thanks to all three of you. And Angela, I love your story. And if any of our viewers today haven't already, go to her website and watch the little film about 40-acre farm. It's your story is one that really comes from the heart, and I appreciate that very much. So you had the food co-ops as your one of your inspirations, Dela, and was there a co-op, a food co-op that may have inspired you to do your work as well?
Not so much a food co-op as just the idea of cooperation and the need for farmers to not have to schlep their products so far to make a living. At least the kind of farming that I do and most of our co-op members, we have CSAs and you have to deliver all of that, but generally farmers markets are involved with that. And when you live in the rural countryside, you got to go to a city to get customers and make money. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. It's really hard. It's hard to raise a family and be gone every Saturday and not be able to participate in your children's activities. And so our hope is that we can offer the farmers enough of an outlet that maybe they don't have to do so much of that, and keep it close where you don't have to drive away. Just bring it to the co-op because it's close. So keeping things local, drawing it all in, that was what was important. And COVID was a friend to us for a while, because delivering meals to people was safer during COVID. But now that that's passed, it's a little more challenging as people are tightening their belts here in the current economy.
Tim, what is the main co-op advantage in your mind?
I think, all co-ops exist to provide a service. And that's either a service because no one else was providing it, or provide a service at a reasonable price, or a service where you can get a reasonable price for your products. The electric co-ops here not only provide electricity, but through the government, USDA, we have funding available that we can borrow out to people in our area, and it can be for someone who's on the co-op lines, but it can also be for in a small town, a local business, to help them get started. It's rural development money that we can loan out at low interest to individuals that want to do something. So we provide the service that no one else would. We provide it at the most reasonable price we can, and we also help with development. If any business, and a co-op is a business, you have to have a return to meet covenants for money that you do borrow, and the return is, or capital credits, any profit you might say from the co-op is returned to the members according to their volume of business with you. But the other side of it is each co-op member gets one vote, and it makes no difference if you have a house with one 60-watt bulb, you're a member and you get one vote. If you have a huge operation and require a huge volume of energy to run your farm, you still only get one vote. So one membership, one vote, and any return or profits is a capital credit that you get back. But I think that's just a fairness deal. We have election. I serve on our local board. I serve a 3-year term. My neighbors in the district around me, we're a small co-op. We have less than 5,000 members. We have a 7-member board. So there's approximately, 700 people in my area. And I know those people, I see them at sporting events, at church, at the grocery store, whatever. They can talk directly to me about any concerns they have, and hopefully I can address those concerns. And if I can't, every 3 years you stand for election, and someone else can be elected to replace you on the board. So you're very very grassroots. So you get people get to voice their opinion, and something actually comes of it. And the other thing is a co-op is very nimble, since it's locally owned and locally operated. If there are changes that need to be made, it goes through the local board. The local board makes a decision and it's implemented. So in comparison to a huge investor owned or something, who knows how long things can take there. But we're very receptive to the people we have living around us. They're our neighbors, they're our friends, and if it's affecting them, more than likely it's affecting us.
I think you very eloquently described what the co-op advantage is. Dela, is there anything you could add to that, to Tim's ideas, and flesh out what the co-op advantage is?
Well, there's a lot of advantages to a co-op, and for us, we all need to work together. And we're living in a time where people are really having a hard time working together. I've learned through our experience with the co-op that sometimes it's painful getting to the point where everybody agrees, but that's the way it should be. We need to be. And even though it's slow and hard sometimes, it's the right way to be. And so I really like it. I guess that some people had joined our co-op who were very structured, very military, and really had a hard time with that concept and just couldn't do it. And some co-ops aren't for everybody, but those of us that they're for, we can change the world. We can change the system. It's not easy. And it is true to be right there in your community with your neighbors. That's so important. Everything has gotten too big, and it's nice to bring it back home.
Angela, one of the slogans has been co-ops put people first. How do you see that in your co-op?
Well, I think that is really exemplified through the principles of cooperation. I like when you were just asking the previous question about the advantages, I was going to say, like, for me, a lot goes back to the principles, the 7 principles, because there is an entry point for almost anyone in all or one of those principles, right? Like concern for community, or, you know, it's just that those principles also really closely align to, you know, a lot of our own either personal, family, or cultural traditions and values. And so I really see the values driven aspect of the cooperative as the way that it invites people to come in where they are. And then, you know, I think there's also some of those technical things, like, you know, co-ops have more women leaders as compared to traditional corporations, and has more diversity in their leadership more than traditional companies, and has more civic participation than other companies. So I think those things really make it like the humanitarian model for doing business.
So tomorrow is November 1st, and I'm thinking about the some of the co-op values, and I'm thinking specifically about democracy. And how is democracy play a part in, I mean, I could answer this question myself, and probably every other cooperator listening to this could answer this question, but let's talk. I'm going to be talking to some people about democracy in the next couple of days on the radio. So I'm just selfishly wondering how democracy is for you in your co-ops. What role does it play? What's the inspiration around democracy in each of your co-ops? And Angela, I'd love to hear you first. Then we'll go to Tim, and then we'll go to Dela.
Well, you know, for us, democracy is such an important part, but when I think about like all of the principles that we have to work with, I'm going to be honest and say that I feel like sometimes democracy, it's the most important one, but it's actually the most difficult one to get our arms around. And so for me, I see it as one of the biggest challenges. Like, it's the ultimate challenge of the success of the co-op if you can figure out how to get democracy right. And I'll say that, you know, we're pretty young, like Dela's group. We're about, you know, the idea has been floating around for about 7 years, but we didn't really make it happen until 2019. And I think it's still probably one of my toughest challenges that I'm always looking for better solutions around. But I think it also is, you know, challenging me as a leader, and it's also just, and it's going to challenge me to figure out, it's the succession plan for the co-op is going to be based on how we handle the democratic process within our model. And so so I so appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, because it's something that I'm always looking to learn about.
Tim? Thank you, Angela.
Well, as far as, you know, for here, the voting locally on our co-op board, we hold caucus meetings for people to get nominated to serve on the board, which each person on our board serves is elected from a specific outlined area in the co-op. But then when we have our annual meeting, to get people, you might say we bribe people to come. We put on a big breakfast buffet for everyone who comes to our annual meeting to vote on everything. We give out door prizes. We offer daycare during the meeting so that young families can come, and we have local 4-H club watches their children and plays games and everything to try to get as many people involved as we possibly can in our election process to be on the co-op board. And we, at our annual meeting, we give a complete report of activities, finances, everything else, so that our members are as informed as they possibly can be. Also, I said I'm on the state board and the national board, and we provide, both the state and national provide education classes and seminars for board members, for management, for employees, to try to keep them informed. And we have something called Co-ops Vote, and we push this out to everyone, and we're very careful. We are nonpartisan, and we want to remain nonpartisan, but we put out, Co-ops Vote, encouraging everyone to vote, is not only on their electric co-op, but on state and national issues too, because we need our voice heard locally, at the state and at the national level. So we're very, very hands-on on encouraging people to exercise their right and privilege to vote.
I'm so glad you mentioned Co-ops Vote. That's one of my favorite programs that we've got in the co-op movement. Dela?
I really agree with what Angela said, and maybe because we have younger co-ops, our co-op, interestingly, is made up of a lot older members like me, and then the others are much younger and don't have much experience. And one thing that's been really important to me is to give that experience, and so to make people feel comfortable, not that you're the boss or you're the old guard and let you do it, but I really want to pass that torch, and working democratically, letting them elect. We just had a new board elected, and the young ones were so enthusiastic and so excited, and they all wanted to volunteer and be on the board, and they voted themselves in, and I thought, this is awesome. And but yet they have so much to learn, so we're going to be right there to help them and work together, and that feels really good. That's how democracy is supposed to be. We're supposed to be working together, but it's been bumpy getting there, and I'm sure there'll be more bumps, and we see that in our country. It's very bumpy, and democracy is messy, but as long as we stay true to it, I think it'll be okay.
It's better than the alternatives.
No kidding.
Is there, just for anybody who wants to jump in on this, what is another one of either the principles or the values that just really pulls you, makes you have that warm feeling in your heart area when you think about it?
I can give you one that not all co-ops, but majority of the co-ops participate in, and it's called Operation Roundup. And what we do is, someone gets their electric bill, and just, for an example, it's $118.20. They can voluntarily have us round it up to the next even dollar amount, so their bill would be $120, and that 80 cents that we rounded it up is put into a fund. And this is, each month from any member who wants to. They are not required to, but they can. Then all this money goes into this Operation Roundup fund, and then there's a board that the co-op board doesn't distribute the money, but we have members in the community just look at this pot of money that we get each month, and they say, we're going to give $200 to the local fire department to help them buy new turnout gear, or we're going to give some money to a 4-H club for a trip that they're going to make or something. So, co-op people, not only do they band together to provide, electricity to an area nobody wanted to do, but they're willing to give just a little bit of money extra in their bill to put into a fund so that this fund can be used to support the community. And we've had occasion where someone is, they're going through cancer treatments and they aren't able to work and they're having a hard time paying their electric bill. And the Roundup board will say, we'll give X number of dollars towards that person's bill so that they don't end up behind or delinquent. So I think that's, the concern for community isn't just the board itself. Concern for community is, majority of the members in the co-op.
Now, see, I thought that was just a food co-op program. So I'm really excited to hear that that your electric co-op is doing that, because the food co-ops across the country have a Roundup program like that. And at my food co-op, the customers vote on the 12 organizations that each month of the year will get whatever has been accumulated in the Roundup. So yeah, that. Dela, anything, or Angela?
In co-op principles, I like the idea of transparency. We don't have enough transparency in our world. There shouldn't be secrets. It should be open. We know the good, the bad, and the ugly, and work with it. And I like the idea of co-ops supporting co-ops. There's a lot more co-ops out there than we realize, and if we know who they are, who each other is, and really make an effort to support each other, it will help the movement grow.
Right. A whole P6 movement is afoot in the co-op realm. One of my favorite principles. Angela?
Yeah, I was actually going to say the principle of cooperation among co-ops. I love to see, I've seen it a lot here in the Twin Cities area when I lived there, the way that when one co-op needed some help, how they trade training. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they help with staffing. It's just really incredible. It's something that you don't really see in the traditional workplace. And the way that it's operationalized and the principles is just one of my favorite things to explain to folks when I'm bringing new members on or when I'm talking to people about the principles of cooperation. That one is one that I like to spend some time on.
How do we feel about getting people to vote in our board elections? Is there a best practice that you've found that works?
Well, like I said, our co-op, we bribe people to come. We give them a big meal, we give them door prizes, do everything we can to get them to come to the meeting and vote. The more participation we can have, the better our co-op is.
Again, you just stole that right out of the food co-op world, Ken.
Hey, we've been going since 1935.
Oh, we stole it from you. I got it now. I got it now.
I wasn't gonna accuse anybody. I just wanted to point that out.
Well, see, that's another P6 thing, right? That's one of the things I appreciate about cooperation is that, we freely share our information and our best practices, because, when everybody it lifts everybody up. I'm trying to think of the saying that my mother always did, and I'm mangling it, but I think that, and cooperators just are naturally, community minded. So how about education, co-op education? Is there an emphasis on that? And do you have best practices in that? Oh, and we have a question coming in. How exciting. But answer my first question, then we'll go to questions in the Q&A.
I guess I'll go ahead and speak here. In the electric co-op world, we have, when you first get on the board, there's a series of 5 education classes that everyone's encouraged to take, and it has to do with, you know, how the co-op operates, how capital credits are accumulated and distributed. We very strong emphasis on safety, not only for our members, but for our line workers and everything else. But we have that. We have the national and state. We put on every meeting we have. We specialize in some classes, and we even have some time set aside where people can come and just, you know, 3 or 4 days and just take one class after the next. Education is huge in doing this. And earlier you said you weren't sure what the saying. We had a senator here in Minnesota, Paul Wellstone, and his favorite saying was, "We all do better when we all do better." And I think that hits the co-ops quite accurately.
And we do have a question from Jason Moore. Jason's the president of the Montana Co-op, and they're considering joining the onesmalltown.org initiative, an economic development strategy that involves multiple new co-op business that supports the community, having many businesses working together, a model that's similar to Mondragon in Spain with 96 different businesses with their own university. How could we coordinate and further discuss this kind of a strategy among co-ops here in the United States? Have you had any thoughts about that?
It's not something I've been aware of.
Do you know about Mondragon in Spain? And their map? Well, you got to look it up. It's pretty, really, it will knock your socks off. Basically a co-op in every economic sector in their region. And it's just part of the fabric of their entire community. You can get a master's degree studying just what goes on at Mondragon. Another question is, how many members, Angela, do you have in your co-op?
In the 40 Acre Co-op, we have about 34 active members. But again, like Dela, we have about a 280 waiting list that we just kind of have to be able, I want to be able to serve the people that we're working with. So it's a lot of work when you're first starting up. And with farmers of color in particular, the needs are pretty immense. So there's a lot to cover, and we don't really have the complete resources that we'd like to. I'd love to have all 300 members active in doing it, but that is a little overwhelming for me right now.
So as we kind of come closer to the end of our discussion today about our co-ops, I want to make sure that you've been able to say everything that you wanted to say about your love of this model, how we can improve it. What do you think are threats coming down the pike to the success of our co-ops? I just laid out a little menu of things that you might have some parting thoughts on.
I think we really need to work to educate people who don't know anything about co-op, about the advantages, just like we need to educate about healthy food and local economies. Then we can strengthen ourselves when we reach out beyond those who know. We're lucky, Wisconsin Farmers Union, we're so lucky we have Wisconsin Farmers Union supporting our activities and helping us. And a future goal, we're still too young, is to share what we learn so that our model can be replicated and there can be more co-ops like our little community kitchen all over the country, and have people draw it back home. So
Kim?
I guess, one of the things that as far as threats, we say that co-ops were born in legislation, and legislation could kill us also. And I think part of that goes to, co-ops are regulated locally by the local board. And there's every once in a while there's a big push on, especially with electric co-ops, is to have us overseen or regulated by the public utilities, the PUC, Public Utilities Commission. Once you take the jurisdiction and decision making away from the local people, the further away you get from where it's happening, the less the decisions that are made, I think, are not as good, because you need to be listening to the people locally. So I think any push to deregulate or take away from the local control, I think that's one of the biggest concerns we have, is that keep it local. That's whether it's food service, our electric service, same thing with grain elevators, supply co-ops, and everything else. A local co-op is much stronger and more agile than anything that's gets kind of diluted as it gets further away from home.
Thanks. Angela?
Yeah, I think I would say, at least on the agricultural side, I'm seeing way more interest in the cooperative model. But what Dela alluded to is that the education really isn't there. So I think we have to do a lot more work with educating folks, especially, not just potential members, but I'm talking like legislators, people in the investment part of the world. I know in our area, we have a really hard time communicating the finance and banking side of the cooperatives and getting the same kind of access to banking services as traditional businesses do. And then we're also in that really gray area where foundations don't really understand what our public service is. And so because we're not a 501c3, they don't think that we're doing community good. So we have a hard time accessing funding and capital resources for that reason. And I think that's one area of education that I've been finding myself working on a lot more than just member education. Mm-hmm. So I think, though, that, with the challenges of our food system, the cooperative model is being looked to as a strong answer. And so we're going to be finding more people looking to the co-op model for that reason. And I think it's just really time for the leaders to step up and for the educators to step up so that we can make sure that we can have a strong model that we can carry on to future generations.
So if you found yourself talking to a state legislator or your representative in Congress or a senator, what would be your elevator speech?
Well, I go down to the Minnesota legislature. I'm kind of that geek that likes politics. I go down to the Minnesota legislature several times a year during session, and I'm out to DC visiting with our elected delegation in Minnesota at least 3 times a year. And the big thing is talking about local control and just telling the co-op story, what we do for people and community. And I think even though many of them aren't familiar with co-ops, it doesn't take too long for them to see the value of local. And I always point out to them the co-op votes part too, that, you know, you've got people out here and we want you as a friend and you want us as a friend.
Good, I like that. Bring up the co-op votes. Della?
Well, having lobbied in Wisconsin and gone to fly in, those are exciting things to do. Not always, they don't always go the way we would like them to, because I think Farmers Union is not as powerful as some of the other ag organizations, but we keep trying, and we don't go away, and they know that. And so yeah, keep lobbying for our co-ops, for our local communities. It's hard to convince people that in power that local is best, because big money's not there. Big money's in the other arenas. But yeah, the Wellstone quote is so important. We all do better when we all do better, and we need to raise each other up. And yeah, I think we need to keep lobbying as much as we can.
And I mean, just keeping the model in front of the decision makers, because not everybody really knows what co-ops are necessarily. Della, what would you do to be consistent, have a consistent message for lawmakers?
I don't think I am very
Oh, not
consistent.
Della. No, I'm sorry. I was looking at Angela and your name came out of my mouth. I
Okay.
apologize.
Go ahead, Angela.
Angela.
Okay, well, I would, there was actually something that, well, one of the things that you said, I found that, when talking to legislators, it's always important to keep the message really simple, but then bring kind of the supporting statements behind it. And I honestly really like your statement, and I was thinking about when I could use it next, but I really think that for every problem, there is a cooperative solution. I think that especially in the economy, in the challenges that we're having today with the food system and what COVID taught us about how the weaknesses in the food system when it comes to providing high quality food on a consistent basis, I think that we have cooperative solutions that we haven't explored yet. And so for me, it's really about not just having those main statements, but also kind of the activity and the business that we're doing and the example that we're setting by, this one of my favorite things about co-ops is just the example that they set to the world, which really caused a whole change in the food system when you look at the way food co-ops did the work and set the example. And then organic came, and then all the other regenerative and other cool, sexy food terms came about local foods. But really, the example was set by those grass-eating kids in the food co-ops, and those people in the farmers that were trying to figure out how to get their dairy prices at some equitable level. Like, this is the way that we've set the examples that change the world, and I think we have to keep doing it. And but starting with those simple answers or solutions, like there's a cooperative solution for every problem, and then showing them how we're doing it.
Well, thank you. We have one other question. Maybe we can get to this one really quickly. Do you feel that co-ops use their position as a tax shelter? And is it, how can co-ops, if there's this perception, fight that and show how they are helpful to society?
Well, I'm always willing to speak up. As far as tax shelter, absolutely not. Everybody that works there, they're paying their payroll tax and that. And if when the co-op makes a return, the capital credits go to the individuals according to how much money they make. Those capital credits that they receive goes on to their tax form, and they have to pay tax on the capital credits. So if the co-op shows a profit, that profit goes out to the members, and the members have to include it with any other income they have, and they pay tax on it. So I don't see any stretch of the imagination how it could be considered a tax shelter.
Thank you for explaining that, because I think there is a misunderstanding about how equity works in co-ops and what a patronage dividend means, and the value of that, and how the co-op uses it and can retain some of that patronage every year to strengthen the co-op for the future. Because we're all looking at ways that we can keep our co-ops vital and alive as we face the future, which is kind of a big unknown every day. So education is important, making sure that our members know what co-ops are. I think that's one of the hardest hurdles, because we're not in business schools necessarily. How can we break through that wall in higher education and to get into business schools? Have any of you had any success in that, as we have 4 minutes left?
I guess education, like you say, I mean, we have a kind of a brochure, Co-op 101, that we try to give to any new members so that they have a general understanding. But big thing is board members are there to answer questions if someone has a question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say here that I've done a lot of work with the University of Minnesota and the Humphrey School of Business here, and I try to, as much as I can, participate with master student research projects. I try to contribute. I'm one of a forever student myself, and so I hire interns here at the farm, and really do believe in the connection with universities and colleges for this education. And so really, I think Cooperative should be a part of, not just business schools, but also the agricultural education curriculum, because it's such an important part of especially rural life. And so, yeah, I try to contribute to that as much as possible, and include students when I have time in research projects.
Well, the National Farmers Union does a great job with education, and we're very grateful to the Farmers Union to have sponsored this brief time that we've had together to talk about the wonderfulness of co-ops and how we enhance our communities and enhance the lives of people in cities and in rural areas. And Lisa, are there any parting words that you'd like to give as we wrap up in our last few minutes?
Oh, well, I would just like to thank Dela, Tim, Angela, and Annie for you all joining us today. There is a link in the chat for you to share your feedback about this webinar. It's always helpful for us to know what future co-op topics you'd like us to host webinars on. And to stay updated with our co-op programming, you can also sign up for our newsletter, our co-op newsletter, and a link to that is also in the chat. But other than that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This was a very fruitful discussion, and thank you to all our presenters for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. It has been really wonderful to get to know all of you and the great work that you're doing in the cooperative space. So carry on and keep your message out there. Thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.